What happens when the developer everyone ignores becomes the only one who can save the company? This is the story of how 30 hours of code changed everything. They say talent always rises to the top, but what they don't tell you is how many brilliant minds get buried under layers of workplace politics, unconscious bias, and the dangerous assumption that the loudest voice in the room is also the smartest. This is my story of breaking through that noise. Ready to see how one weekend can rewrite your entire career? Hit that subscribe button, because the best plot twists happen when you least expect them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stared at my monitor, the familiar glow of code reflecting off my glasses. It was another typical Tuesday morning at TechFlow Solutions, and I was already 3 cups of coffee deep, trying to wake up my brain for another day of being overlooked. My name is Emma, and I've been working as a software developer here in downtown Seattle for almost 2 years. The office sits on the 23rd floor of a glass tower, with views of Elliott Bay that would be stunning if I ever had time to look up from my screen. Rain streaked the windows today, casting shifting shadows across the open workspace filled with standing desks, colorful beanbags, and the occasional ping-pong table that screamed, "We're a fun tech company." But fun wasn't exactly how I'd describe my experience here. "Emma, did you finish debugging that payment module?" Marcus Chen's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade. My supervisor stood behind me, arms crossed, his expression already suggesting he doubted my capabilities before I even answered. "Almost done," I replied, not turning around. "I found the issue with the decimal precision handling. Should have it resolved within the hour." "Almost done isn't done," Marcus said, his tone carrying that familiar edge of irritation. "The client demo is tomorrow, and we can't afford any glitches. Maybe I should have David take a look at it." David? Of course. David was the golden boy of our team, fresh out of Stanford with an ego the size of the Space Needle. He'd been here 6 months less than me, but somehow managed to get assigned to all the high-visibility projects while I was stuck with bug fixes and maintenance work. "I've got it handled, Marcus," I said, finally turning to face him. "The solution is actually pretty elegant. I'm implementing a custom decimal handler that—" "Just get it done," he interrupted, already walking away toward David's desk. "David, I need you to review Emma's work on the payment module. Make sure it's solid." My cheeks burned with frustration. This was the 3rd time this month Marcus had asked someone else to review my work, as if I couldn't be trusted to deliver quality code. Meanwhile, David's sloppy implementations regularly made it to production without a second glance. I watched Marcus lean over David's shoulder, explaining something in an animated whisper. David nodded importantly, shooting a glance in my direction that I pretended not to notice. The rest of the team continued their work, either oblivious to the slight or too uncomfortable to acknowledge it. Seattle's tech scene was supposed to be progressive, inclusive, forward-thinking. But sitting here in this sleek office with its motivational posters and diversity statements, I felt more invisible than ever. My code was solid, my solutions were innovative, and my work ethic was unquestionable. Yet somehow, I remained on the periphery of every important conversation. The morning dragged on with the usual rhythm of keyboards clicking, coffee makers gurgling, and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. I finished the payment module fix and tested it thoroughly, documenting every edge case and potential issue. When I submitted it for review, I made sure to include detailed comments explaining my approach. Lunch came and went in the small break room, where I sat alone with my sandwich, while the others huddled around the main table, discussing the upcoming product launch. I could hear snippets of their conversation, technical challenges and creative solutions being tossed around like a casual game of catch. But when I tried to join in, offering suggestions based on similar problems I'd solved, the conversation would somehow shift, or someone would change the subject. "Emma, you're being too quiet," Sarah from marketing said during one of these moments, though her smile felt forced. "What do you think about the new user interface mock-ups?" Before I could answer, Marcus jumped in. "Actually, Emma's been focused on back-end work. The UI stuff is more David's area of expertise." And just like that, I was dismissed again. David launched into a detailed explanation of his vision for the interface, while I sat there feeling like a ghost at my own workplace. The afternoon brought a team meeting in the conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus stood at the front, presenting the timeline for our biggest project yet. A comprehensive e-commerce platform for a major retail client. The contract was worth millions, and success would mean promotions, bonuses, and recognition for everyone involved. "I'm assembling the core team for this project," Marcus announced, clicking through slides on his laptop. "David will be our lead front-end developer. Jennifer will handle the database architecture. Tom will manage the API integrations. And Emma," he paused, looking directly at me. "Emma will provide support wherever needed." Support. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. While everyone else got specific, important roles, I was relegated to being helpful wherever others needed assistance. It was the professional equivalent of being picked last for dodgeball. After the meeting, I lingered in the empty conference room, watching the rain intensify against the windows. The city looked gray and uninviting, matching my mood perfectly. I thought about my computer science degree, my years of experience, the countless nights I'd spent learning new frameworks and languages. Where had it gotten me? "You okay?" Jennifer's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, her expression genuinely concerned. "Just thinking about the project," I said, forcing a smile. "Exciting opportunity." Jennifer stepped into the room and closed the door. "Look, I know Marcus can be difficult, but your work is really good, Emma. That payment module fix you did?" I looked at the code. "It's brilliant." "Thanks," I said, though the compliment felt hollow. "I just wish Marcus saw it that way." "He will," Jennifer said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "Sometimes it takes time for people to recognize talent. Just keep doing what you're doing." As the day wound down, I found myself staying late again, working on a personal project that had been nagging at me. It was a debugging tool I'd been developing in my spare time, something that could analyze code patterns and identify potential issues before they became problems. The idea had come to me during one of those frustrating debugging sessions, and I'd been refining it for months. The office grew quiet as my colleagues headed home to their families, their evening plans, their lives outside these walls. I remained at my desk, the only sound the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping of my computer processing data. The debugging tool was taking shape, its algorithms becoming more sophisticated with each iteration. Maybe this was my path forward. If I couldn't get recognition for my regular work, perhaps I could make a name for myself with something innovative, something that would prove my worth beyond any doubt. But for now, it remained my secret project, hidden in a private repository where Marcus couldn't dismiss it before it was ready. By the time I finally packed up and headed for the elevator, the office was empty except for the cleaning crew. The night security guard nodded at me as I passed, probably wondering why I was always the last to leave. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the streetlights. I walked to my car, my mind already turning over possibilities for tomorrow, for the next challenge, for the moment when I might finally step out of the shadows and into the light. 3 weeks into the e-commerce project, I was ready to update my resume. Every morning brought new reminders of my peripheral status on the team. While David held court in the main conference room, sketching out front-end architectures on the whiteboard, I sat in my corner, handling the tasks nobody else wanted to touch. Legacy code integration, browser compatibility fixes, and endless rounds of testing. "Emma, we need you to look at the checkout flow," Marcus said during our daily stand-up. The rain had returned to Seattle, drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm that matched my growing frustration. "There's some weird behavior with the shopping cart persistence." "What kind of weird behavior?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be vague and unhelpful. "Users are reporting that items disappear from their carts randomly," David chimed in, not looking up from his laptop. "Probably something with the session management. Should be a quick fix." A quick fix. Everything was always supposed to be a quick fix when it came to my assignments. Meanwhile, David's complex front-end components were treated like delicate works of art that required careful consideration and multiple design reviews. I spent the next 2 days diving deep into the shopping cart issue, tracing through hundreds of lines of code written by 3 different developers over the past year. The session management wasn't the problem at all. The issue was deeper, more fundamental. The database queries were poorly optimized, causing timeouts that triggered failsafe mechanisms, which then cleared the cart data to prevent corruption. But fixing it properly would require restructuring a significant portion of the back-end architecture. Not exactly a quick fix. I found the root cause, I announced during Thursday's stand-up, presenting my findings to the team. The issue is with the database connection pooling. We're hitting timeout limits during peak traffic, which triggers the cart cleanup process. I have a solution, but it'll require some architectural changes. Marcus frowned, clearly not happy with the complexity of my answer. How long will these changes take? If we do it right, maybe a week. But there's also a temporary workaround I can implement today that'll reduce the frequency of the issue by about 80%. Just implement the workaround, Marcus said dismissively. We don't have time for major architectural changes right now. I felt my jaw clench. The workaround isn't a permanent solution. We'll still have the underlying problem, and it'll get worse as traffic increases. Emma, we need to stay focused on the deliverables, Marcus replied, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. The client doesn't care about perfect architecture. They care about functional features. That afternoon, I implemented the workaround, knowing it was like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. The cart persistence improved, but I could see the underlying issues lurking beneath the surface, waiting to cause bigger problems down the line. My debugging tool had evolved significantly during these frustrating weeks. Working on it had become my outlet, my way of channeling the creative energy that I couldn't seem to express in my regular work. The tool could now analyze code repositories, identify performance bottlenecks, and suggest optimizations. More importantly, it could predict potential failure points before they manifested as actual bugs. I'd tested it on our own codebase and found dozens of issues that no one else had noticed. The shopping cart problem would have been flagged weeks ago if anyone had bothered to run a comprehensive analysis. But the tool remained my secret, tucked away in my personal projects folder. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected crisis. I was working on another quick fix when Jennifer rushed over to my desk, her face pale with worry. Emma, we have a problem. The entire payment processing system just went down. No one can complete purchases on the staging site. My heart sank. The staging site was where we demonstrated new features to the client, and we had a major presentation scheduled for Monday morning. If the payment system wasn't working, the entire demo would be a disaster. Where's Marcus? I asked, already pulling up the system monitoring dashboard. Emergency meeting with the client, Jennifer said. They're trying to explain the situation. David's been working on it for 2 hours, but he can't figure out what's wrong. I looked across the office to where David sat surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups, his usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious panic. Tom and 2 other developers huddled around his desk, everyone talking at once as they tried to diagnose the issue. Let me take a look, I said, opening up the payment processing logs. The error messages were cryptic, but I'd seen similar patterns before. The system was failing during the final transaction verification step, but the logs didn't show any obvious cause. I started tracing through the code, following the execution path step by step. That's when I noticed something strange. The payment module I'd fixed weeks ago was throwing warnings that were being suppressed by the error handling system. The warnings weren't causing the failures directly, but they were creating a cascade of timing issues that eventually led to transaction timeouts. But there was more. The database connection pooling problem I'd identified earlier was contributing to the instability. The workaround I'd implemented was holding the system together under normal load, but the increased traffic from testing had pushed it past its breaking point. I think I know what's happening, I called out to the group around David's desk. David looked up, his face flushed with frustration. Emma, unless you have a magic solution, we don't have time for theories. It's not a theory, I said, walking over with my laptop. The payment system is failing because of the database connection issues we discussed earlier. The workaround I implemented is creating a bottleneck that's causing transaction timeouts. That's impossible, David said. The payment processing doesn't use the same database connections as the shopping cart. Actually, it does, I replied, pulling up the connection configuration. They share the same connection pool. When the pool gets exhausted by cart operations, payment transactions can't get database access within the required time frame. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Tom leaned over to look at my screen, his expression shifting from skepticism to understanding. "She's right," he said quietly. "Look at the connection pool metrics. We're hitting the limit right when the payment failures start." David stared at the data, his face going through several colors. "But that means..." "It means the architectural changes I proposed 3 weeks ago weren't just nice-to-haves," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They were necessary to prevent exactly this kind of failure." Jennifer looked between David and me, clearly sensing the tension. "Can we fix it now?" "The client presentation is Monday." I was quiet for a moment, my mind racing through possibilities. The proper fix would take days, maybe weeks. But there might be another way, something that could address the immediate crisis while buying us time for a permanent solution. "I might have something," I said finally, "but I'll need to work through the weekend, and I'll need full access to the production configuration." "What kind of something?" David asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by desperate hope. "A comprehensive solution," I said. "Not just a fix for the payment system, but a complete overhaul of how we handle database connections, session management, and error handling. It's ambitious, but it's the only way to ensure we don't have this problem again." The room was quiet, except for the gentle hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for someone to make a decision. "Do it," Jennifer said finally. "Whatever you need, we'll make it happen." As my colleagues gradually headed home for the weekend, I remained at my desk, surrounded by energy drink cans and takeout containers. The office felt different in the silence, less oppressive, more focused. This was my chance to prove myself, to show that I was more than just a support developer who handled quick fixes. I opened my debugging tool and pointed it at our entire codebase. Within minutes, it had identified 47 potential issues, ranked by severity and likelihood of causing system failures. The payment processing problem was number 1 on the list, but there were others that could cause similar catastrophes if left unaddressed. This was bigger than just fixing a broken payment system. This was about reimagining how we approached software development, about building systems that were robust, scalable, and maintainable. It was about proving that sometimes the quiet developer in the corner sees things that others miss. The rain continued to fall against the windows as I settled in for what would be the longest weekend of my career. But for the first time in months, I felt energized, focused, alive. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical for Seattle in October. I'd been at the office since 5 a.m., having barely slept the night before. My mind kept racing through architectural possibilities, debugging strategies, and the terrifying reality that the entire team was counting on me to solve a problem that had stumped our supposed star developer. The office felt like a different world on weekends. Without the constant chatter of meetings and phone calls, I could hear the building's subtle sounds, the hum of the HVAC system, the distant ping of elevators, the occasional footstep from the security guard making his rounds. My desk had become mission control, with 3 monitors displaying different aspects of the system: real-time performance metrics, code repositories, and my debugging tools analysis. The first breakthrough came around noon. While tracing through the payment processing flow, I discovered that the issue was even more complex than I'd initially thought. The database connection pooling was just one layer of a multifaceted problem. The session management system was creating orphaned connections, the error handling was suppressing critical warnings, and the load balancing wasn't properly distributing traffic across our server cluster. "This is insane," I muttered, staring at the web of interconnected issues my debugging tool had uncovered. Any one of these problems could cause instability, but together, they created a perfect storm of system failures. I ordered pizza and settled in for the long haul. The solution would require touching nearly every part of the back-end architecture, but I had a plan. Instead of trying to fix each issue individually, I would implement a comprehensive connection management system that addressed all the problems simultaneously. The work was methodical, almost meditative. I wrote new database connection handlers, implemented proper connection pooling with intelligent load balancing, and created a robust error handling system that could gracefully recover from various failure scenarios. My debugging tool served as my compass, continuously analyzing the code and flagging potential issues before they became problems. By Sunday afternoon, I had a working prototype. The new system wasn't just fixing the payment processing issue, it was improving performance across the entire platform. Database query times were down by 40%, connection timeouts were virtually eliminated, and the error handling provided clear, actionable feedback instead of cryptic failure messages. But the real magic happened when I integrated my debugging tool directly into the development workflow. The tool could now monitor the codebase in real time, identifying performance bottlenecks and potential failures before they reached production. It was like having a crystal ball that could predict system problems before they occurred. I spent Sunday evening writing documentation, creating test cases, and preparing a presentation that would explain not just what I'd built, but why it was necessary. The technical details were important, but I also needed to communicate the broader implications. How this approach could prevent future crises, improve system reliability, and save the company both time and money. By the time I finally left the office Sunday night, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. I'd built something remarkable, something that went far beyond fixing a simple payment processing bug. But would Marcus and the team recognize its value, or would they dismiss it as over-engineering? Monday morning arrived with surprising sunshine, as if the weather gods had decided to give me a small boost of confidence. I arrived at the office early, running final tests and preparing for the client presentation. The payment system was working flawlessly, but more importantly, the entire platform was performing better than it had in months. Marcus arrived looking haggard, clearly stressed about the client meeting. "Please tell me you have good news," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Better than good," I replied, pulling up the performance metrics. "The payment system is working perfectly, and overall platform performance is up significantly." Marcus studied the numbers on my screen, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. "These metrics are accurate?" "Completely accurate," I said. "But that's not the best part. Let me show you what I've built." I walked him through the new connection management system, explaining how it solved not just the immediate payment processing issue, but dozens of other potential problems. I showed him the real-time monitoring capabilities, the predictive analysis, and the comprehensive error handling. "This is extensive," Marcus said, though I couldn't tell if he was impressed or concerned. "How long did this take you?" "About 30 hours over the weekend," I replied. "But Marcus, this isn't just a fix. This is a complete reimagining of how we handle system architecture. The debugging tool alone could save us weeks of troubleshooting time on future projects." Before Marcus could respond, David arrived, looking much more relaxed than he had on Friday. "Emma, please tell me the payment system is working. I've been having nightmares about the client presentation." "It's working," I said simply. "Better than working, actually." I showed David the same demonstration I'd given Marcus, watching his expression change as he grasped the scope of what I'd accomplished. The casual dismissiveness he usually directed at my work was replaced by something I'd never seen before: genuine respect. "This is incredible," David said, studying the code architecture. "The connection pooling algorithm is brilliant, and this debugging tool—" "Did you write this yourself?" "Over the past few months," I admitted. "I've been working on it during my free time." Jennifer arrived as I was explaining the technical details to David, and soon Tom and the other developers had gathered around my desk. For the first time since I'd started working at TechFlow Solutions, I found myself at the center of attention, fielding questions about architecture decisions and design patterns. "The client presentation is in an hour," Marcus announced, checking his watch. "Emma, I want you to present the technical aspects of the solution. This is impressive work." My heart skipped. Marcus was asking me to present to the client, to take credit for my work in front of the people who mattered most. It was a recognition I'd been craving for 2 years. The presentation went better than I could have hoped. The client was impressed not just with the solution to their immediate problem, but with the proactive approach to system reliability. They asked detailed questions about the debugging tool, the performance improvements, and the long-term benefits of the architectural changes. This kind of predictive analysis is exactly what we need, the client's technical director said. We've been burned by system failures before. Having a tool that can prevent problems before they occur is invaluable. After the client left, the office buzzed with energy. The project was back on track. The client was happy, and everyone seemed to be looking at me with new eyes. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Emma, Marcus said, approaching my desk as the excitement died down. I owe you an apology. I underestimated your capabilities, and I let my own biases cloud my judgment. What you've accomplished this weekend is exceptional. I looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Thank you, Marcus. I just want to do good work. You don't just do good work, he said. You do exceptional work. And from now on, I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. The afternoon brought a series of conversations that would have been unimaginable just a few days earlier. Marcus discussed promoting me to senior developer, with the possibility of leading my own team. The client expressed interest in licensing my debugging tool for their internal development processes. David, who had barely acknowledged my existence before, asked if I'd be interested in collaborating on a research paper about predictive code analysis. But the most satisfying moment came when I was finally invited to join the important conversations, the strategic discussions about future projects and technical directions. I wasn't just being included. I was being asked to lead. As the day wound down, I found myself alone at my desk again, but this time the solitude felt different. Instead of isolation, it felt like peace. The rain had returned to Seattle, but the office felt warm and welcoming. My debugging tool continued to monitor the system, quietly preventing problems before they could occur. I thought about the weekend, about the long hours and the pressure and the fear that I might not be able to deliver. But I had delivered spectacularly. More importantly, I'd proven to myself that I belonged here, that my ideas had value, that my voice deserved to be heard. The invisible developer was invisible no more. 2 months after the payment system crisis, I sat in the same conference room where I'd once been assigned to provide support wherever needed. This time, however, I was leading the meeting, presenting the quarterly development roadmap to a room full of senior executives and department heads. The autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished conference table. Seattle's tech scene was buzzing about TechFlow Solutions' innovative approach to predictive development, and much of that buzz centered around the debugging tool that had started as my secret side project. The predictive analysis system has prevented 47 potential system failures over the past 8 weeks, I reported, clicking through slides that showed impressive metrics and cost savings. We've reduced debugging time by 60% and improved overall system stability by 45%. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, nodding approvingly. Our relationship had undergone a complete transformation since that chaotic weekend. He'd become not just supportive, but genuinely interested in my ideas, often seeking my opinion on technical decisions and architectural choices. Emma, what's the potential for scaling this system to our other product lines? Asked Sarah Chen, the VP of Engineering. She'd joined the company just last month, brought in specifically to oversee the expansion of our development capabilities. I've been working on exactly that, I replied, pulling up a new set of slides. The system is designed to be modular and adaptable. We could have it monitoring our entire development ecosystem within 6 months. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk, which now occupied a prime spot near the windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The view was spectacular today, with ferries cutting white trails across the dark water and the Olympic Mountains rising majestically in the distance. It was the kind of view that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Seattle in the first place. Hey, Emma. David appeared at my desk, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Got a minute? I accepted the coffee gratefully. David and I had developed an unlikely friendship over the past few months, built on mutual respect and shared technical interests. He'd turned out to be much more thoughtful than I'd initially given him credit for, and his front-end expertise complemented my back-end skills perfectly. "I wanted to talk to you about the Stanford conference," he said, settling into the chair beside my desk. "They accepted our paper on predictive code analysis. We're presenting in December." I grinned. The research paper we'd co-authored had been accepted for presentation at one of the most prestigious computer science conferences in the country. It was a huge honor, and it meant that our work was being recognized by the broader academic community. "That's incredible," I said. "I can't believe we're actually going to present at Stanford." "You deserve it," David replied. "The predictive analysis system is genuinely innovative. You've changed how we think about development workflows." As David headed back to his desk, I reflected on how dramatically my professional life had changed. The debugging tool that had started as a personal project born from frustration was now being used by development teams across the company. 3 other tech companies had reached out about licensing the system, and I'd been approached by 2 venture capital firms about spinning it off into a standalone product. But perhaps the most significant change was in how I saw myself. The imposter syndrome that had plagued me for years had gradually faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in my abilities and ideas. I no longer felt like I was fighting for recognition. Instead, I was focused on pushing the boundaries of what was possible. "Emma!" Jennifer's voice interrupted my thoughts. "We need you in the design review meeting. The client wants to discuss the real-time monitoring dashboard." I gathered my laptop and headed to the smaller conference room, where the product team was meeting with our major retail client. The relationship with this client had evolved significantly since the payment system crisis. What had started as a standard e-commerce platform had grown into a comprehensive digital transformation project, with TechFlow Solutions serving as their primary technology partner. "Emma, perfect timing," said the client's CTO, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd become one of my biggest advocates. "We've been discussing the possibility of implementing your predictive analysis system across our entire retail network." The conversation that followed was energizing in ways I'd never experienced before. Instead of being asked to implement other people's ideas, I was being consulted on strategic technology decisions. My opinions carried weight, my suggestions were taken seriously, and my expertise was valued. The system could monitor point-of-sale transactions, inventory management, and customer behavior patterns, I explained, sketching out the architecture on the whiteboard. We could identify potential issues before they impact customers, optimize performance in real time, and even predict seasonal demand fluctuations. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "This is exactly the kind of proactive approach we need. When could we start implementation?" "I'd need to build a specialized team," I said, my mind already racing through the possibilities. "It's a significant undertaking, but I think we could have a pilot program running within 4 months." After the meeting, I found myself walking through the office with a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. The space looked the same. The same beanbags, the same motivational posters, the same ping-pong table. But my place in it had fundamentally changed. Marcus approached me as I was returning to my desk. "Emma, I've been meaning to talk to you about something important. Sarah and I have been discussing the new advanced development division we're creating. We want you to head it up." I stopped walking, certain I'd misheard him. "Head it up?" "As Director of Advanced Development," Marcus clarified. "You'd be leading a team of 12 developers, focusing on innovative solutions and emerging technologies. It's a significant promotion, with a significant salary increase to match." The offer was everything I'd dreamed of when I'd first started at TechFlow Solutions. A leadership position, a team of my own, the opportunity to shape the company's technical direction. But more than that, it was validation of everything I'd worked toward. "I accept," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the words came out. Marcus smiled. "I had a feeling you would. Congratulations, Emma. You've earned this." As the day wound down, I found myself staying late again, not because I was struggling with unrealistic deadlines or unappreciated work, but because I was excited about the projects ahead. My debugging tool hummed quietly on my computer, monitoring systems and preventing problems while I planned the structure of my new team. The rain had returned to Seattle, pattering against the windows in a rhythm that had become comforting over the years. The office was quiet except for the gentle sounds of the building settling and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. But this time, the solitude felt different. It felt like possibility. I thought about the woman who'd sat in this same office 2 years ago, desperate for recognition and respect. She'd been talented and dedicated, but she'd also been afraid. Afraid of being overlooked, afraid of not being good enough, afraid of speaking up when she had something valuable to contribute. That woman had been transformed by crisis into someone who could see problems before they occurred, who could build solutions that others couldn't imagine, who could lead teams and shape the future of technology development. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Congratulations on the promotion. Want to celebrate with drinks?" I smiled, gathering my things and preparing to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new responsibilities. I would be leading a team, mentoring junior developers, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible in software development. As I walked toward the elevator, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. The woman looking back at me was confident, accomplished, and ready for whatever came next. She'd learned that sometimes the most important recognition comes from within, that true professional success isn't just about being seen by others, but about seeing yourself clearly. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The invisible developer had become visible not through luck or chance, but through persistence, innovation, and the courage to prove that even the quietest voices can change everything. Seattle stretched out below me as the elevator descended, its lights twinkling in the evening rain. Somewhere in those lights were other developers, other innovators, other people fighting to be heard. I hoped they would find their moment, their crisis, their opportunity to step out of the shadows and into the light. Because everyone deserves to be seen, everyone deserves to be heard, and everyone deserves the chance to prove that they're capable of extraordinary things. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I walked out into the Seattle evening, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring.